All right, so now that you understand what the modern pistol looks like, what a modern semi-automatic pistol is and what it does, let's talk now about the other type of handgun that still maintains a very small presence in the realm of private home defense or concealed carry, and that is the revolver. Now, revolvers are a more archaic form of handgun. There are many technological advancements that have been implemented into semi-automatics that make them grossly superior to the revolver in almost every way, save a couple. We're going to talk about those later, but those couple reasons are why still maybe 3, 4, or 5% of the people who carry concealed choose a revolver. You probably won't, but it's still helpful to know about them. And so let's take a quick look at the parts of a revolver, what makes them different than a semi-auto, and what its main components are, and then we'll talk about the function of the modern revolver. So, as you can see here, they do not have a top half of the weapon that is spring-loaded, and they have they've got a handle, they've got a trigger, they have a barrel, but then this part here is obviously different. What this is the cylinder. So on a revolver, you essentially have the frame of the revolver in which the barrel is integrated in a hard way. It's not spring-loaded, it does not move, unlike a semi-automatic. And then instead of a magazine, because the handle is completely solid, it has a cylinder. And the cylinder is this weapon's magazine. Remember, a magazine is just where ammunition or powder is stored in a device, whether it's a ship or a handgun. So in this weapon, the magazine is the cylinder. It's called a cylinder, of course, because it's round. The cylinder pivots, it rotates around a center axis, and the reason is because when it's closed and locked into place, and you can see this handgun is completely unloaded and safe. You can see down the chambers, and you can tell that there is no ammunition in it. But when you press the trigger serves a double action function of both rotating the cylinder and pulling the internal hammer back, and then releasing the hammer so that it clicks on the next cylinder in line. And every time you press the trigger, the cylinder rotates one space, and the hammer falls on the new cylinder well. And so this is a pure double action revolver. However, some revolvers, even though they are still double action, and we're going to talk about that term in just a minute, some of them have external hammers. And so as you press the trigger, you can see the hammer moving to the rearward and then clicking back forward again. There are many reasons why a modern weapon would maintain an external hammer, and there are several very good reasons why they wouldn't. We're going to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of having an external hammer later on here in this part 1 of the program. But for now, just understand that having the hammer gives you the option to be a little bit more accurate if you have the time to manipulate it, but having a hammer provides a massive disadvantage, which is it makes it very easy for the weapon to get snagged on your clothing when trying to draw. So most modern, purely self-defense revolvers will have an integrated hammer. So that is essentially the components of the modern revolver. Now, let's talk about the function of the modern revolver. So you already saw how a semi-automatic works, where you have to load cartridges into the magazine, and then you insert the magazine into the weapon, and then you charge that weapon to put a fresh cartridge into the firing chamber. And then from that point forward, provided the weapon functions as it should, every time you press the trigger, the detonation of a cartridge is going to make that handgun cycle, readying the next cartridge for firing. In a revolver, it's, as you just saw, a little bit different, but at the same time, very similar, because every time you press the trigger, that weapon is ready for firing again. So, to load a revolver, you pop the cylinder out, which is done right here with this lever. You push forward, and that unlocks the cylinder, and then from the right-hand side, you push the cylinder out. Then, you take your cartridges, put them in the cylinder wells. If it becomes difficult to access any of the cylinder wells, just simply rotate it with your thumb. And we like to put the revolvers in the palms of our hands like this to load them, rather than holding them like this to load them. Because here, if I drop a cartridge, it's falling down on the ground, just like that. It's falling down on the ground. But if we do this, if we drop a cartridge, it lands in the palm of our hand. And so we put them in, assuming I didn't just drop one in, we would have 5. You close the cylinder, and now the weapon is ready for firing. Now, we're going to talk more about revolvers later on, and you're going to see some of the disadvantages alongside its advantages. But one of them is that because this weapon does not have a safety, it has to have a very heavy trigger press. So you'll find that the trigger press weight on this one, and these are dummy cartridges, these are snap caps. If that's not clear, I should have pointed that out. These are snap caps, so they're completely safe. But the trigger press weight on these is about 12 pounds. And for reasons that you're about to learn as we go through this program, that makes these very difficult to fire accurately. So, to unload the modern revolver, you simply press on this, which is the extractor. It's a manual extractor integrated into the cylinder, and you can see that pushes all of the cartridges out. And so usually after you fire a brass-cased cartridge, it's going to expand to the size of the firing chamber. And if there's any sort of grit or dirt or gunpowder residue, it can make the casings, the empty casings inside the cylinder wells, difficult to remove. That's why they have this. See, with snap caps, especially that have not been fired, and in a clean revolver, I can just dump them out, and you can unload it that way. But if you had just fired all five or all 4 of these rounds, then you'd find that you'd tip it upside down and nothing would come out. They're stuck in there. So what you do is you tip it upside down and you push the extractor, and that's going to cause all the empty casings to spill out. When it's empty, you can check and see that it's empty there. So that's essentially it. Again, we're going to talk more about the modern revolver later on as we discuss its advantages and disadvantages. But at least now you know the general functionality of a weapon like this. And in case you end up choosing one of these for self-defense, or just from handling one that you're trying at a shooting range, or even just looking at them in gun stores, you at least now know what you're doing.